Well, good morning. I want to welcome you again. There's been a lot of traveling. I know a lot of the staff and elders are traveling this month, and maybe you're traveling. You're visiting with us this morning. So we're glad to have you here. As Kevin said, I'm Hunter Johnson. I'm the youth minister here. We're just glad that you chose to come and worship with us. There's times in my life where I've really wished that I was gifted in my voice, musically talented, and this is one of those times because I thought of a song when I was thinking about Jesus being our brother and a relationship of brotherhood. And I'm a big fan of Johnny Cash, have been for a while, and he has this song that's called Highway Patrolman, and it was actually written by Bruce Springsteen, but I heard it through Johnny Cash. If you know this song, it's a song about two brothers. And one of the brothers, he's kind of the straight and narrow, right? But the other brother is the troublemaker. And the responsible brother, he becomes a part of the highway patrol. So anytime his brother gets in trouble, he's the first to hear it come over the radio waves, and he shows up to the scene to be there for his brother, to help him out of whatever situation his brother has gotten himself into. And here are some lines from the song that I thought were very impactful. So he says, "Nothing feels better than blood on blood. I catch him when he's straying, like any brother would. Man turns his back on his family. Well, it just ain't no good." And that's the theme throughout the whole song, is this brother constantly there for his younger brother that just keeps messing things up, and despite that, his brother is there for him. And whether you're Bruce Springsteen, you're Johnny Cash, or you're just sitting in the pew this morning, I think we all realize the importance of that sibling relationship. I'm an only child, so I missed out on a lot of that growing up. And if you've got a brother like Frankie in the song who's always getting in trouble, you might wish that you were an only child. But there is an ideal that we all see, that there is a relationship that is special between siblings. And this really stood out to me. I forget where I read it, but I was reading about different relationships we have in life. And the sibling relationship is often the longest lasting relationship you have in your entire life. You knew your sibling, before you ever chose to get married, probably 20 years or so before you chose to get married. You and your siblings most likely will outlive your parents. They predate many of your friendships. So that sibling relationship is just special in the way that God designed a family. That there's a closeness there that is different than the parent-child relationship or a marriage or any other relationship that we could find. It is something special. So that's why I believe it is important for us to realize that Jesus is our brother, to realize the full potential of that relationship and fully understand what that means, because many of us, we feel comfortable with God being a father. That puts some distance between us and God. And we kind of view him many times as the disciplinary person in our life, the person who controls my future, the good things or the bad things that come my way. And when you think about God through Jesus being our brother, it changes that dynamic. So the place we're going to look at that is in Hebrews. I appreciate Tyler, mentioning Hebrews this morning, as we meet usually on Tuesday mornings at the coffee shop, and we go through Hebrews. And Hebrews is, in a nutshell, if you wanted to summarize Hebrews, it could be summarized in the phrase, "but Jesus." Especially at the beginning of Hebrews, you have all these examples in the Old Testament of things that were important to the Jewish people in their faith. And then it's like the Hebrew writer says, "but Jesus." So he'll say something like, you had a leader in Moses, and you followed Moses, but Jesus is now a better leader. You had a high priest who offered sacrifices for you, but Jesus is your high priest now. You used to worship in a temple or a tabernacle made by human hands, but Jesus had made a new temple not by human hands. And it's all about how Jesus is the better version of whatever they have previously experienced. With that in mind, I want us to start in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he suffered. So I just want to pause for a second here. The pioneer of their salvation being our salvation, says he's made perfect through what he suffered. And that may hang some of us up a minute, so I just want to stop for a second. Not perfect in the sense that Jesus wasn't perfect on earth until he suffered, but understanding this perfect could be understood as complete, okay? He was completed, or he made his mission complete through his suffering. Not that he lacked anything before he went to the cross, but his mission was completed through his suffering on the cross. And that leaves us with a question. Well, what is the mission that was completed through his suffering on the cross? So verse 11, I think, helps us to answer that question. Both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. Jesus, through his death on the cross, makes a new family. And I challenge you to go back through the scriptures and read the crucifixion story through that lens. The lens of a creation of a family. Many of us, we know that, when Jesus died, the veil was torn so that there was no longer a separation between God and humanity, between God and the Jews, but also the Gentiles. And it's really cool to see that one of the first people to acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God is a Gentile. A Gentile, one of the Romans there at the crucifixion, he says, surely this man was a Son of God when he sees him crucified. And it's at that moment, right? Jesus has created a new family. The Gentiles come, and they're a part of God's family, not just the Israelites. And this is a huge, huge shift in thinking. Because as you read throughout the Old Testament, you don't find much language about the Israelites viewing God as their father. Oftentimes you see God referring to the whole nation of Israel as his child, as his son. But when Jesus comes onto the scene, he refers to God personally as his father. And now he's opening the door for us to have God as our father. But it's like God's like, that is great and that's groundbreaking, but I'm going to take it a step further. I'm not just going to be your father above you, but I'm going to be beside you, and I'm going to be your brother through Jesus. So as we pick back up the tail end of verse 11 going into 12, so Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. He says, I will declare your name to my brothers and sisters in the assembly. I will sing your praises. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, he says, here I am, and the children of God has given me. And some of us need to hear that again, that Jesus is not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters. He's not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters. And I think the key reason is because Jesus knows what it's like to be here on earth. Him, out of the entire Trinity, is the only one who took on flesh and lived 30-something plus years as a human. experience pain, experience disappointment, betrayal. And Jesus, I believe, is not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters because he knows what it's like to live, try to do the right thing, and get punished for it. Try to make the right decisions, and still it blows up in your face sometimes. And Jesus says, anybody willing to follow me and be my brother and sister and live this way, despite going through those difficulties, I am proud of those brothers and sisters for doing that. I know it's hard. So we can be encouraged by that Jesus truly does understand where we are coming from. And take Jesus' words for it. Just like Paul was saying last week, right? Jesus is there, he has all these people around him, and his actual biological family, like they want to talk to Jesus, and they can't get through to them, so they say, hey, will you relay the message? We want to speak to Jesus. And he makes this bold statement. He replied to them, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, hear my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. And what a statement by Jesus. He elevates God's will, his faith family, over his biological family. And I hope that times in your life you have found this to be true. That, like me, although I'm an only child, I have had many brothers and sisters through the church. People who were there for me. And these are a few I thought of. James Couch a couple weeks ago, riding in the church van, tire blows. And we pull over to the side, and he opts out. Like it's an everyday thing. Goes around, and we work together, fix a flat, get back on the road. He was my brother. I think about Kevin and Jennifer just recently. The house we were supposed to move into was not ready. We had many surprises, and things had to be done. And they said, hey, we got a place for you to stay. Stay here as long as you need. They're my brother and sister. The elders and Paul have prayed with me on a weekly basis about things that are going on in my life, worries and doubts that I have, constantly in prayer. And I know it doesn't just stop there. I know they pray for me throughout the week. And I've had little brothers and sisters in the faith through the youth ministry step up and minister alongside me. And I'm not the only youth minister. They're doing it as well. I've had volunteers throughout the years, like the Hickmans, the Kilpatricks, Amy Crownover, Ella Wendell, Madeline Alsop. And there's so many others that have been my brothers and sisters throughout the years who have filled a need when I had it. I've got to experience what Jesus talked about, and I'm truly blessed to have done that. And that's where I want us to shift a little bit and think about what are we being called to. So I'm going to talk about a specific application I think we can do. But if you feel that this isn't the best application for you, something else God is calling to you, by all means, do that. One of the things that I have noticed about our church, and something that I think we've all struggled with, is how do we move from meeting together on Sunday and being a group of strangers who meets together in a building on Sunday morning, how do we go from there to being actual family that we see in the Bible? And that's a struggle, something that I've wrestled with, something I know that leadership has wrestled with. One thing I want to say is I believe it's encouraging that if the God of the universe can be our brother and all the effort that took for that to be a reality, that we have hope that we can be brother and sister as well. So I want to suggest something. You've probably experienced this, taking a photo for an event like a graduation or maybe it's a wedding, something like that. And, people tend to kind of disperse and not want to get really close together. And then someone will inevitably say, hey, act like you love one another and stand beside one another so I can take this photo. And one thing I want to think about this morning is, if God were here this morning and he looked out across his family, would he have a similar reaction? Would he think about that? Hey, you guys are supposed to be family. I can't even get you in one photo. I get to take 4 or 5 just to get you all in. And I think about, what would a visitor experience? Now, I've heard different numbers, but this auditorium seats 600 plus, so let's just say that. What would a visitor experience if all 215, 220 of us were sitting together when they walked in and they thought, man, this auditorium is huge, yet they all choose to sit beside one another? Like, why don't they spread out more? I think that they would say, there's something special here. Like, there's something truly, like they choose to be with one another when they have the option to be away from one another. And I just want us to wrestle with the reality of the choice we all make. It's a small choice where we sit, sure. And we all have our reasons for where we sit. Some of it is because of health reasons. We have to sit on the edge. Or because we serve on communion, so we're on the edge. Or you're like me, my kids, we take them to Super Church, so we're on the edge. Or you and your family have sat there for years and years and years and years, right? And your grandparents have sat there for years and years and years. We all have our reasons. The things I want us to wrestle with this morning is my reason worth the cost? Every time we say yes to something, we say no to other things. And is my yes worth it? Because I believe that moving from being strangers to being actual family takes intentionality. I bet in your decision to get married or to have a friendship, it didn't just happen. You were intentional. You pursued dating, or you pursued talking to that person. You pursued listening to that person so that you could learn more about them. And too many times we have people who slip out, we never see them again. But instead of them slipping out, what if they had to walk over 3 or 4 people to get out the pew and had to talk to all those people before they left? And what if instead of knowing the back of people's heads, we actually knew what was going on in their heads because we talked to them? And I include myself in this conversation because I'm just as guilty of it too, just sitting in my spot and staying there. Whatever it is, whether it's a physical, hey, I'm going to choose to sit closer to that family on the other end of the pew, or there's nobody in front of me, so I'm going to move up closer so I can be to someone else, or it's a move that God is calling to you outside of this auditorium. I know somebody who needs prayer. I need to call them this week. That's my move. I want to challenge you to make a move towards a brother and sister in Christ. But all that hinges on one thing, right? That hinges on if we're truly brothers and sisters. And some of us this morning maybe have not made that commitment, right? Jesus is willing to proclaim us as brothers and sisters, but we have never proclaimed Jesus as our brother. We have never said that he is the perfect sacrifice for me. I'm willing to follow him and willing to be baptized, confess his name in front of people. And if that's you this morning, I'd like to invite you to do that as we stand and sing.